Okay. This is an interview with Norman Wiener, Hampton Inn, Tarrytown, New York, February 5th, 2003, approximately 1:10 p.m. The interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Yes, I am Norman Wiener. That's W-I-E-N-E-R. I was born in New York City on January 28th, 1923.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering military service?
I graduated from George Washington High School in 1940. The Depression was ending. I looked for a job quickly, and I started City College at night, taking college courses.
Okay. Where were you, and what were your emotions when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I know exactly where I was. A group of us were gathered to listen on radio to the New York Giants playing, I think it was Chicago, football game, and there was an interruption. They said there's something happening, and I heard one broadcaster, radio fellow, say to another, "Where's Pearl Harbor?" He didn't realize it was being recorded, and it seems that was the first news of the Japanese bombing, and in fact the fellow's house that we were visiting was killed in the Pacific. His name was Bob Bondi, and to this time, 60 years later, I think of him. But that's my first recollection of Pearl Harbor and the Japanese bombing.
Do you remember what your reaction was at all, or?
Well, I was a teenager and working, and it occurred to me that how can this happen? I really did think, we have defenses, where are our airplanes? And why didn't we protect our ships? And it was too long ago now. I was a kid, and I guess I didn't understand all these happenings.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I was drafted. I had my number. I went into the military in December 1942, and interestingly enough, went to Fort Dix in New Jersey, which was a central point for most New York guys. And they were shipping men out by trainloads, literally filling up rail cars of men and sending them to southern training camps. I waited there in a tent in January, and got kind of cold in New Jersey. And eventually, they called my name on early morning roll call. That was the major activity of the day, waiting for the morning roll call. And 9 of us were put in the back of a truck. And we were taken to Brooklyn, the New York port of embarkation. And we looked at each other, they can't ship us overseas now. We have no training. We've been wearing uniform but haven't learned anything. That's what we thought initially, strangely enough. They're sending us. But then in talking to each other on the truck ride, standing in the back of a truck, we learned that each of us had been involved in some way in the shipping or cargo business. I had been working for a foreign freight forwarder and custom house broker. Another man was a stevedore. Another man had worked for a trucking company. Every one of the 9 of us had been involved, and what was happening was that we were being assigned to the Transportation Corps. The Transportation Corps was a new branch of the Army. It had just been broken away and separated from the Quartermaster Corps. It used to be a piece of the Quartermaster Corps, and here it became a corps of its own, the Transportation Corps. So I became actually a charter member of the Transportation Corps. And for almost 2 years, I worked at the New York Port of Embarkation, shipping, cargo, and troops overseas, doing pretty much the same work I had done in civilian life, that is, basically documentary procedures. And all this came about because with my first discussion at that 5-minute interview that sets up the entire rest of your military life, I told the fellow who did the interviewing that I was familiar with dock receipts, bills of lading, export declarations, manifests, and all paperwork contingent to and part of moving cargo and or personnel, which was true. I had worked for freight forwarder and taken some traffic and transportation courses at college at night.
Okay, so you basically just went right to work instead of receiving any
Exactly. They gave us
training.
what they call provisional training, marched us around one afternoon a week and tried to teach us left face and right face and some of the small basic stuff, so we didn't look out of place from the military viewpoint. But then the WAC, the Women Army Corps, was formed, and we were going to be replaced by WAC and sent overseas as Transportation Corps replacements. And mentally, in thinking about it, I decided that if I could go overseas, or when I went overseas, I would prefer to go as a second lieutenant as opposed to an enlisted man, because I saw the lifestyle, I saw the living conditions, I saw the facilities, and the officers had much better lives. They lived with a certain air of superiority that made me feel this is what I wanted. So I applied for Transportation Corps OCS, which at that time was in New Orleans, or near New Orleans, at Camp Lochet on Lake Pontchartrain. And I'm not sure of the spelling of either of those words. And those camps are long since gone, because I've been back to New Orleans and they've been washed away, wiped away, destroyed. But when I was interviewed by a three-officer board, and I told them about my traffic and transportation, they said, you should make a good transportation officer, but you've had no military training. So they sent me to Camp Drum, which is upstate New York, near the Canadian border. And I went through 13 weeks of infantry basic training, which included the infiltration course, going through all the facilities that all the men who were going into military were going through. Then I had one free week or leave, and on a train down to my officer training school. Well, I guess I was tougher than I am now, and I successfully completed Transportation Corps OCS. My sister came down and brought me this ring as a graduation gift at the time. It still has the date in there. It was November 44, and my initials. From there, I was again assigned, this is November, to New York Port of Embarkation. I thought, this is bizarre, going back to the same place I had left. I didn't really want that, in fact. But within a month, I was on the Queen Mary going over to Europe. Now, the Queen Mary was a wonderful target for any German submarines if they could have caught her. Would have been a feather in the cap of any sub-commander. And we did not travel in convoy. The Queen was too fast for these slow-going vessels. And we got to Scotland, I believe. Gorick, Scotland is the city where the Queen put us ashore. And I tell friends, I crossed England and never touched English soil. There was a train waiting with steam. We went across the docks, the cement docks, got aboard the train in Gorick, Scotland, chugged across England to Southampton, where a small boat was waiting, and went right across the English Channel to France. Le Havre was a destroyed mess. The Germans had ruined it before they left. So we had to go down rope ladders the side of the ship. But in reflecting, one more comment about the Queen Mary. I lived in a room about the size of this. There were 16 of us in a room. We thought we were very fortunate. 4 tiers of 4 high, which wasn't too bad at all, because the 16 of us were sort of sharing one bathroom. Because I did have occasion to go down below and see how the troops were living, and they were swinging in hammocks. It seemed to be hundreds and thousands of them in small rooms, and there was a stench that got unbearable because I think men vomited or defecated or urinated or did what they had to do that Mother Nature pushed upon them, not voluntarily but probably involuntarily. So we went across on the Queen, got across into France, and went to various replacement depots, they were called. Finally, I was put aboard a train and ended up in the port of Marseille, France. I became a pier officer. There were 6 vessels tied to a pier, 3 on each side. And the pier officer's responsibility was to make certain that all the trucks waiting on line got their turn quickly as possible to get to the hatch to get cargo so they could be moved up to the depots. Because some worked slower and some worked faster, so the drivers didn't care if you didn't move them along. And we used military drivers, civilian drivers, any vehicles we could get our hands on, because Patton and his army was demanding cargo to keep pushing the Germans back. The unit I was assigned to had been through North Africa, Italy, and Sicily, whatever other activities had been taking place prior to the invasion of Europe. And strangely enough, a quick comment, the invasion of the south of Europe, the Mediterranean area, is never talked about in any movie or activity or anything else, and there was an invasion. But the one in Normandy, of course, is the one that seems to make the headlines, make the movies, and get talked about for the most part. But I think by that time the Germans were a bit weary and pulled back rather quickly. But that's only my opinion. I arrived shortly after, but not at the actual invasion. Although one of the battle stars I have on the European theater indicates it was within the time of the invasion of the Mediterranean part of France, and I was in the area at that time, so I was entitled to the battle star on the European medal. Well, as this unit was sent home, and I was...
Excuse me, what unit was that you were saying?
It was the 15th Traffic Regulating Battalion. We had officers strung out all through the south of France, from Lyon, which is, I would guess, 100 miles above Marseille, all along the south, small southern ports, not the large known names of Nice and Cannes and Marseille, which are the 3 but there are many smaller ports. Well, being a transportation corps officer, I was designated Highway Operations Officer, which meant I was responsible for all four-wheeled vehicles moving in and around and through the port of Marseille. I would get my reports through the afternoon from each truck battalion, each mobile unit, as to how many vehicles they had, because some units or vehicles got destroyed, some had to go for repair, and some didn't have drivers. Drivers got hurt, wounded, or incapacitated. So when we had each afternoon what is called port call, P-O-R-T-C-A-L-L, port call, each depot would send a high-ranking officer down, hoping to get as many vehicles as they could. They would send colonels, lieutenant colonel, and say, I need 20, I need 30, I need... Because they knew what tonnage was coming out of the vessels and into their depot to be moved up to the fighting men. So I would have to, thinking of Signal Corps, Ordnance, engineers, medical, all the various branches of the military, tell these higher ranking officers, I'm sorry, you can only have 15 vehicles. You can have 7, you can have 12. And I had a great deal of antagonism. That lieutenant was telling a much higher rank officer what his next day's activities were going to be. But it worked. We won the war. And I'm glad to say that one vessel was going to be outloaded, and I, quotation marks, volunteered to bring it home. So I came home as a cargo security officer on a ship called the David F. Barry, which landed in Staten Island. And this vessel was for the purpose of unloading or closing out various depots in France. Well, when it came to being discharged, by this time I was a first lieutenant, we went to Fort Hamilton, and an officer said, all men who want out of the military, over there, all those who want to stay in, over there. And I had to make a quick decision. I said, I worked very hard to get this, just to give it away. I can always write a one-sentence letter and say I resign my commission. So I decided to stay in the active reserves. A few stories about Europe, and one of the things I remember was bringing the pay down to one of these small outloading places. What the small vessels were doing was towing obsolete ammunition into the Mediterranean and dumping it. Because, like other things, ammunition, I learned, gets tender as it gets older. They have dates on it, just like, I was going to say your cigarettes, but I don't use them. And they should be used prior to that date. Now, when I brought these men their pay, I said, anything you need? And I said, yes, battleship gray. We're Army, we have no gray paint, and our vessel is getting scrubbed up. So I went aboard the next Navy vessel that came into Marseille. I said to one of the officers, can I get any battleship gray? And he said, oh, sure, boy, we have lockers full of it. That's the color paint that wastebasket has there. And so I took as much as I could in the back of my Jeep. I said, anything I can do for you fellows? He said, any chance of getting a Jeep to ride in and see the city? I said, yes. So I arranged with the motor pool to assign a Jeep to their vessel for a day. I got my battleship gray paint, took it down to the men, and they got their Jeep to go around and see the city of Marseille. That's a true story. And I have others that I've forgotten over 60 years, but we did many diversified things. The next unit that was formed in Marseille was the 40th TC, Traffic Regulating Battalion. But to my knowledge, we never had a meeting of all the men within the 40th. I believe this was only for administrative purposes, for doing payrolls and other records, because, as I say, men were scattered 2 and 3 all over the south of France, and there was no need to put us together as a unit just to stand and have a picture taken. Oh, it would have been nice to have, just as I have at home a picture of my graduating class at OCS, Officer School. We also, I was surprised to find one of my OCS classmates running a hotel in Lyon. I had gone up to bring a courier. They needed an officer courier to bring to Paris the troop strength that's required an officer to carry. And I volunteered for that, took it up to Paris, spent a few days until the Army officer running the hotel said, "Hey, your unit's looking for you." Oh, say, I better get back. Okay. And in going back, I stopped at Lyon, and one of the men who had been a classmate of mine at the Transportation Corps, OCS, was running the hotel. I said, I don't remember his name. I said, "What do you know?" He said, "I don't know, they gave me the job, and I don't mind." But he gave me a colonel's room upstairs, which meant I had a private toilet, as opposed to running down the hall. So we were able to help each other in many ways. And when I came home, I didn't hear from the military for 2 or 3 years. I sort of forgot. I started a business called Orbit Shipping, ORBIT, Orbit Shipping, foreign freight forwarding, custom house brokerage, because that's the work I knew. Some men I had known wanted to hire me as their traffic manager. I made the co-suggestion, or the opposing suggestion, why not let me open a business? I'll handle your shipments. You'll pay me a fee for each shipment, which was the going procedure. But, should I look at this more often?
That's fine.
But you can not have to pay me a salary, and I can get other clients perhaps. And it worked out well. Orbit Shipping grew. Eventually, I merged with an even larger freight forwarding company called Globe Shipping, and I separated from the shipping activities when Globe moved to New Jersey. I didn't want to add another half hour to my trip. It was bad enough going to south of Manhattan from Westchester. Now, my entire active adult life has been in traffic and or transportation, either civilian and or military. I belong to the following: the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Disabled American Veterans, Reserve Officer Association, Retired Officers Association, Military Order of the World Wars, and the Order of Lafayette. I'm a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. I have the following citations: Army Commendation Ribbon, Good Conduct Medal, European Theater Medal with Star, European Theater 1 Battle Star Medal, World War II Victory Medal, and the Army Reserve with 1 cluster. That's the military background. I used to attend many more meetings than I do. but some of these groups have disappeared because the older guys can't make it, and the younger men don't seem to want to join much of anything.
Now, what are those other decorations you have on your jacket?
These three, oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, thank you.
Yes, let me...
Those three are French. They were given to me, I can't read them, I don't know. The French government made an attempt a few years ago, and it was, oh, by the way, this necktie is a gift from the port of Marseille, where I was stationed. Oh, there it says so right there. Port something de Marseille. They had some meetings here at the consulate and or some World War II groups, and they tried to find those people like myself. I don't mean every soldier who carried a rifle through France, but since I was there a year and a half in Marseille, I guess I really helped save that port. Evidently that's their house flag, I presume. And they awarded me 3 medals. Can't read them. And I have at home 3 French certificates thanking me for my efforts on behalf of the French and their war problems during World War II. And I think it's wonderful that they took the effort to search some of us out who really helped and do what they could. These are the American decorations. These 3 are French. The others are some military things I belong to.
Okay.
Now, well, okay,
No,
when
go
you went into reserve, you were in the reserves, what did you do in the reserves?
Good. In the reserves, for 2 or 3 years, I didn't hear anything.
Uh-huh.
That was, let's say, from 1946 to 1949, and frankly, I had sort of was swept away. I had forgotten. I got a letter from General Kirkpatrick, I think it was, or Phil Patrick, I don't remember. He was the head of Madison Square Garden. That was his, and he was a general of some time. Come down to Madison Square Garden, and they had hundreds of men like me who were reservists. And they told us, we haven't forgotten you, and that's when they started to break us into different branches. In my case being Transportation Corps, I was assigned to the New York Port of Embarkation, and I would have been the other shift if the New York Port ever went around the clock, 24 hours. As it is, it still is, constantly, shipping troops, although now I think a lot more goes by air. But in the 40s and 50s, still using vessels, they shipped the supplies, the resupply, the cargo that's needed to take care of troops once they're overseas, and the troops themselves. So we did what's called provisional training, but I had been through this, and frankly, it was a way, I think, of holding us as a unit. We'd have lectures. Sometimes we had to give lectures. We had speakers. Guest speakers came very often. I think they liked to come to New York. Just as one other sideline, I gave a course at the World Trade Center, which was recently blown up, as we all know, September 11. The course was entitled Handling Exports Effectively. And I found mostly people not from New York came. 2 reasons. They wanted to get away to New York, very honestly. They people mention that. It's a place to visit. And whatever they had learned about traffic and transportation had been from the guy who was being replaced, retiring. It's like the horse with the barn. That's what they knew. And as you learn in any industry, there are other diversified ways of moving cargo. You shouldn't necessarily send it by the vessel that takes it to the first port, because you might get a lower rate if your vessel is going to a different port and then to the port of destination. And many other things. The description of the cargo can alter the freight rate. If you call it steel rods, it'll be a certain rate. If you call it stainless steel, it'll be a different rate. If you call it metal rods, it might be a third. No, the tariffs, the cargo tariffs, are so set up that the rates fluctuate with the phrase that's used in the description. And most people didn't recognize this. And there are other potentials that I've forgotten a lot of my traffic things because I stopped any active traffic work when I retired almost, well, it is 20 years ago, 60. I was in my early 60s. I'm now 80, so.
So you retired from the reserves in what year?
Oh, not the reserves.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I'm
I
sorry.
should, that's my commercial activity. The reserves pushed me out, and they retired me.
Hold that just
Yes.
like that, and I can zoom in on it. Okay. We're getting really close.
83.
Let's see. 83.
I believe that was 1983,
Yes.
Yes.
when I was 60 years old. I probably could have done a better job than someone at 25, but no, I'm just teasing. I feel quite satisfied. I did a certificate of retirement and certificate of appreciation. Okay. I did also get Army Commendation Medal. The important part here, this is from Marseille, and it says that Lieutenant Wiener, while serving with the Army of the United States, distinguished himself by meritorious service in the capacity of Port Highway Operations Officer. During the period in question, Lieutenant Wiener was instrumental in obtaining the maximum truck lift from available sources. Most of the available lift for port clearance was supplied by a civilian truck pool using U.S. vehicles and civilian drivers, and a miscellaneous truck pool utilizing both civilian vehicles and drivers. This type of operation required constant on-the-spot supervision to move the tremendous volume of cargo discharged daily by the Port of Marseille to rail and depot. Lieutenant Wiener worked tirelessly for long hours to ensure the proper dispatch and obtain the necessary trip turnaround to get the freight moved from shipside, despite the difficulties arising from constant contact with civilian drivers. And I'm telling you, you had to be on the scene. You didn't sit at a desk. You got out and got onto your pier area, because the drivers were not keen on driving. They would just fall asleep in the cab and perhaps do a different job during the day.
So you use mostly civilian drivers then?
Yes. The military was up doing other things. At that time, And they were older men because the young French guys, like our guys, had been in the military. And if they made one trip, we wanted to get 2 trips on them back and forth. But that's a lot of driving, and then a lot of it's at night. It's not that easy on the roads. And the roads were not ever redone. I mean, they were
Were they driving civilian trucks or military
both.
trucks?
We had a civilian motor pool
Mhm.
where we'd hire the truck with a driver if we could get them, because the military were using theirs from depot to front lines where the civilians couldn't go. They would bring the cargo from the signal, ordnance, or whatever depot it might be, up to Patton and his troops. And that's what the military should and did. Because obviously you constantly need resupply of everything, well, from toilet paper to shirts and whatever's up there, and never mind. People think of war, they think only of bullets and guns.
Yeah.
The amount of things that a man uses, or certainly a battalion or regiment or division, it's constantly amazing, the things that come off of a ship.
Yes, logistics is very important. So the drivers you basically were in charge of took from the port to
To the depots.
depots, and then the military would take it from the depots
Yes,
to the
the
front
depots
lines.
would get their requests from the front lines troops. I used Patton as the general who did most of the pushing. And I think he once came down to the dock area with his famous pistols. And he was quite a flashy guy. He loved the publicity. He loved to be in the news. And he was killed in Europe in some sort of a crash.
Yeah. Did you get to meet him personally? Or?
I probably swept right past. I don't remember shaking his hand. I was too low in rank, I suppose. I can't say yes, I did. I don't know what else. I forgot that I sent you these. And it's good to get them back, I guess.
I see you're a life member of the VFW.
Yes.
Now, did you ever keep in contact with any others that you worked with or served with?
Initially, we did. But it's been a long time now, and I think some have died, some have moved to Florida, some have gone away. And even my list of units that I belong to don't have more than 1 or 2 meetings. And I've suggested time and again, we have a luncheon meeting at a nice restaurant as opposed to trying to go out at night, because we can't get enough people to come. Yes, veterans of foreign wars is one of those. I belong to shipping. Oh, I'm a member, and I'd like to mention this because NDTA, which is the National Defense Transportation Association. I'm a charter member and life member.
Now, what was the purpose of that organization?
It was for those people, here's the title, National Defense Transportation Association. I was in the transportation called OCS when this was formed in 1944. It's for people in the traffic and transportation industry who were involved with the military. So I'm a charter member and a life member.
Did you ever make use of the GI Bill?
Yes, when I bought a house, I think I got a $5,000, what's it, a non-interest paying loan? And I use that as part of my, I've only owned 2 houses. One I'm living in now, in New Rochelle, and one on Long Island, near Valley Stream. I don't know if you know Long Island. But.
I vaguely know where that is.
And I think perhaps I could not have bought that house if I didn't have the availability of, I think it's $5,000 toward.
Did you ever make use of that 5220 club?
I think I was never out of work.
I thought just from the way you talked that you...
I had no trouble, even to this day, well now, I'm out of touch, but people tell to me, and they still use, oh, you're an exporter. I said, no. An exporter buys and sells merchandise. But if you sell 1,000 of these lamps to somebody in Brazil, you need me as a foreign freight forwarder to do the paperwork to move it from New York to Rio de Janeiro to Brazil. And that, well, not only arranging your first trucking to get it to the dock, arranging ship space aboard a vessel, arranging all the documents, clearing the U.S. Customs. We literally moved the cargo after the exporter does his sale. He doesn't, most of them don't have any knowledge of the paperwork. They know their lamps, they know what they should collect, how much money they want for it, but then how to get it from here to there, they have no idea. And that's what I was doing, the paperwork involved with export moves.
Well, okay, thank you very much for your interview.
Do you feel that you've gotten
Yes,
everything
yes.
you want?
Yes, sir.
I'm so